Josh and Frankie. What a couple of dumb shits.
Hello, Primates! You found Primus Tracks. Congratulations. You found us on the podcast. You can also find us at Primus Tracks on Instagram and Threads. There is a Facebook group. Say that again. There is a Facebook page appropriately called Primus Tracks. And primustrackspod@gmail.com is the email address. I am Josh. I am joined by the one, the only, the landlord of Primus Tracks Towers, Frankie Berestein.
Hi, Josh. Yeah, I mean, it's already ours.
Today we are talking about Long in the Tooth. It is track 4 from the Les Claypool Frog Brigade release, Purple Onion. Before we get to that, of course, we have a lot of business that we take care of on the front end of these here podcasts. There are many ways to support the podcast. One is patreon.com/Primus Tracks. Go there and check out all the different tiers of support for Josh and Frankie, a couple of dudes. You can also support the podcast by checking out our sticker offerings on Instagram at Primus Tracks. 2 of them designed by Frankie, 1 by our pal Jack Cunningham, printed by our pals at Sticker Robot. There's a pin post there with the images of those beautiful stickers. And of course, all proceeds from stickers support the server cost for hosting this thing for free forever, or as long as we can. Easiest way to support the podcast is spread the word and or let those ads at the end, after the music fades out, just let them run. I don't know what they are. I don't care. You probably don't either, but it gives us a penny or two each time you let those roll. And thank you all for your massive support. The sticker pile is rapidly disintegrating, Frankie, so we might...
Oh, fantastic. Please save some for me.
There is a Frankie pile, and I don't want to dip into it. Get yours while you can, Frankie.
Sure.
Everybody else, take your time. We have some miscellaneous debris here. A couple of things have popped up recently, Frankie.
As you're all aware, a pachyderm base is being auctioned off. Once again, proceeds go... Can you remind me the name of the hospital?
St. Jude's Children's Hospital.
Jude. Yes, where they treated baby Matthew. So we know that is Les's favorite place to donate to. I think the website is being a little conservative with their estimate of a range between 20 to 40,000. I do hope it raises a lot more because it's for a great cause. And if you watched Jason Momoa's series, you will be well aware that it was made for him, and it can be seen in all its glory on that episode.
The Momoa Koa pachyderm base.
Yes.
And our pal Larry Lalonde just popped up in a quasi-unexpected place.
Lur made a cameo in the music video for Serge Tankian's new single, AF Day. So you can actually see Lur performing the track there. And of course, he features on the track as well.
Lur playing some big rock guitar. It's always fun to hear him let loose in that regard. So yeah, really cool that he turned up in that video to go along with that track. Now, I believe Serge has a new EP. I think it's an EP. It's not an EPPP. I know that. It's a regular old EP. It's coming out later this year. I don't know if Larry is on any other track on that release, but I suppose we'll find out later. But really
the name of Jason Momoa's series is On the Roam, by the way.
Because, he looks like a big hairy buffalo. So it just stands to reason.
And that episode is particularly interesting because we do get some additional insight into the creation of the pachyderm bases. It's kind of a nice compliment to the peak that we also got in the Geddy Lee series.
All right, thanks for those pieces of miscellaneous debris, Frankie.
Much welcome, and let's see what the base goes for.
I'm laying odds that it goes for well over 30,000 because their range was 20 to 40. So I'll take that middle and set that as the over-under. I'm going over 30,000 with ease. I haven't looked at the auction at all, so I don't know what the current bid is. So don't tell me. because I think it's going to go over 30 if it hasn't already. We'd have to sell a lot of stickers to be able to afford that, Frankie.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about Long in the Tooth, track 4 from Purple Onion. This one checks in at a scant 1 minute and 51 seconds. Musicians are credited to the following: Les Claypool, bass and vocals, Enor, slide guitar, Skerrick, Barry sax, and Mike Dillon, electric, bow and arrow, and metal sounds.
The Cambridge Dictionary defines to be long in the tooth as idiom, informal. To be old, often too old to do something. And the example that they provided is, he's a little long in the tooth to be wearing shorts, don't you think?
That's from the Cambridge Dictionary?
Yeah.
That just tells me there are a lot of varicose veins on display.
I got a bit of live history and a Les Claypool quote for you.
Oh, please.
Well, Long in the Tooth is another staple Claypool solo track that has been performed over 200 times. It often involves intricate rhythms and percussive intros and improvisations. Many a times the song was a springboard for a percussion battle between Mike D and Paul Obaldi. It was premiered on April 18, 2002 in Seattle, and it was performed heavily by the Frog Brigade. The track was then adopted by the Fancy Band, and it also enjoyed heavy rotation. It was then performed by the Fungi Band. Interestingly enough, it was only performed 7 times by the resurrected Frog Brigade lineup from last year. Interesting contrast, right? First it was a staple, then it became a rarity in the last tour. A live performance from Bonnaroo in 2002 is included in the 5 Gallons of Diesel DVD, while a performance from July 22nd, 2006 from Cleveland, Ohio is included in the Fancy DVD. So the song is very well documented officially in terms of Les Claypool releases. Now, I have a quote here, which I think you're going to find truly interesting. This album was originally going to be called Long in the Tooth, said Les Claypool when asked about the significance of the Frog Brigade latest album. The whole Purple Onion thing came about when I was kind of stumbled across it in a Bob Dylan book. Purple Onion was the first club he ever got paid to play in. He got $5 an hour and slept on the floor. So that's what you've revealed in the first episode.
Yep.
A good friend of mine's little brother died on a motorcycle in front of a place called the Red Onion near where we lived. There was this big Purple Onion sign similar to the cover art. Purple Onion just sounded cool to me. So that's quite fascinating to realize that this was actually gonna be the title track of the album.
Of interest, because we know that the title track usually is the grand statement to be made with an album release. And so for the declaration to be, "I'm old," is fascinating. The majority of these tunes, and of course album release, were right around the time as Les was knocking on the door of 40 years old. You know, culturally, 40 is seen as that midline to life, to one's lifespan. It's funny, Frankie, because I crossed that threshold a few years ago.
Did you feel anything at all turning 40?
I feel fine. I don't feel any different. And of course, all of that is relative. I know I can't run as fast as I could when I was 28. That's fine. I don't care. But everything else, I have more wisdom, I suppose. I have more foresight. I'm actually stronger, physically stronger than I've ever been because I started lifting weights a few years ago. And so I feel great. So 40 to a lot of people is that midlife crisis / death sentence period of their lives. But I haven't experienced that whatsoever. I should say it helps that I already had a convertible before I turned 40. So that was helpful. I didn't have to go out and buy one. For you car enthusiasts, I have a 1963.5 Ford Falcon Futura convertible, which was belonged to my wife's grandfather, and it is a delight to cruise around in. V8 260. It's not getting up very fast, but it makes plenty of noise. So, yeah, I didn't really have that, Frankie. Now, in about 37 years, when you turn 40, I'm going to tell you, don't worry about it. It's going to be fine. It also helps that I still have most of my hairline and all my teeth, and they're not very long. Did you do any historical research on that phrase "long in the tooth," Frankie, outside of the dictionary?
So I'm just familiar with the term regarding how you kind of start feeling generational gaps, right, with younger people.
The idea of being long in the tooth actually goes back a couple hundred years to how people would gauge the age of horses. And so as horses age, their gums recede. That phrase was used to evaluate horses when they were up for sale,
Oh, wow.
slash to approximate their age, to determine value and that sort of thing, and whether they should be working horses. And then that idiom was transferred to humans in general as an quasi unkind way of saying someone is old.
Too old to be wearing shorts.
Definitely. So, Long in the Tooth, the music portion of Long in the Tooth, Frankie, it certainly is more of a dirgy, which I think makes sense because it is this statement of, I'm getting old, and so it does feel kind of dirgy in a way, but it also feels just like an excuse to deliver these lyrics. Like it was meant to be an interstitial. I don't think this was meant to be a 5-minute, no holds barred tune. Les wanted something short and sweet to drop in there, and this was it. What are your thoughts on this one as from an instrumentation standpoint? Because to me, it's really loose, and there is a dedicated bass line and percussion pattern with Enor and Skerrick providing flourishes, and that's what loosens things up. But it's just kind of there for me.
In terms of instrumentation, I've always regarded this song as a springboard for jamming and improvisation in a live setting.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the song is on the album merely as a reference to a song that could get improvised on during a live setting. So, instead of just going into a percussion extended jam or just going into a drum solo, I guess they wanted to have a track that they could use as, something that could be the base for that. But with time, I think it also there were many occasions where the track was just performed on its own without drum solos. They did always extend the intro, though.
Okay.
I think that was always built on, in a live setting. But I don't know, I guess it could be parallel to what happened in the jam scene with bands like Fish, right? They would restrain themselves when they recorded studio versions of the songs. And what you heard on the album was just a sample of what you could get live. So Long in the Tooth is this kind of short transitional track in the album, but in a concert, it could be 10 minutes long or more.
You didn't bring a 10-minute Long in the Tooth today, did you?
No.
Okay. I want to call it a jam vehicle, but because of the instrumentation and the way it sounds, I think I'm going to call it a jam jalopy because it just has that ramshackle sound to it. That's not to say the track is bad, but it has the sound of an old vehicle, actually, which seems appropriate, that has seen better days. And let's hear that intro because it does, just that metaphor of the old clanker rings true for me.
Long in the tooth, long in the tooth. I'm looking round the corner and I'm long in the tooth. Waiter, hey, check please in the corner booth. I'm feeling rather long in the tooth.
So any of those percussive sounds you hear in this track, if you hear them under the hood of your automobile, please go get that checked out. It's very important. The other thing I wanted to point out from playing that intro was Les is doing that lower register thing again. Waiter, hey, check please in the corner booth. He's down there. So it's not
kind of a Tom Waits inspired thing, no?
Absolutely. It's not a standard delivery, and I do recall when this album first was published and released that this track was immediately identified as a Tom Waits inspired track, if not a straight up tribute. The Tom Waits voice needs no introduction, but it does sound like Les is attempting to channel that to a degree without being too derivative. The subject matter of the lyrics certainly cement that for me, but also the percussive aspect of it, the simple bass line, and the noises that Skerritt and Eno are making. Very Tom Waits-esque. And I really, and we know that Tom has said this is one of his top albums of all time to listen to.
Yes.
Kind of interesting to choose one where the artist is blatantly channeling you on one of the tracks. To hear that and go, oh, that sounds like a song I'd write. Hey. But I'm sure Tom was flattered because they're buddies.
I think Les is very strategic with the placement of the songs on his albums.
Yeah.
We're coming down from the high of Buzzers of Green Hill, which is this really fantastic, compelling track. I guess Long in the Tooth serves as a pretty good palette cleanser before we get to the next song, which again is pretty intense and pretty upbeat. You can't have one compelling track after the other consecutively, right?
Can't have two dance parties in a row. You gotta have a seat and get a breather and then get back up for that next one. So I think the track placement is helpful in that regard. I'm gonna play my favorite part of the studio track. That's it. That's my favorite part. I love the Stompin' Tom part, and I love that ball slide work that Enor's doing right after it. It's chromatic, it's wacky, and it's emblematic of the tune. The virtuoso musicianship is not necessarily on display, but what they're doing serves a purpose, and they do. The four men involved in this track do create quite an atmosphere.
Yeah.
With this one, especially channeling Tom. Tom Waits, that is, not necessarily Tom Connors, even though he is referenced in the lyrics. Let's talk about those lyrics, Frankie.
Let's take a look.
These are some of the more interesting lyrics on the record because of the massive number of references Les is making throughout. I also do love the cadence, the musical cadence of the phrase, long in the tooth. Long in the tooth. I'm looking around the corner and I'm long in the tooth. Da 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 da. There's kind of cool, that pattern. And so, as we know, the guy's got quite an ear and a mind for lyrics. Let's just run down those references. Frankie, there's so many. The first one I would like to address is the lines, time is a loser, boozer, schnoozer. He carried up and married up a Midwest Hoosier. I don't know who he is because we have the first person, I'm feeling rather long in the tooth, just prior to that. So if the narrator is now shifting to third person and saying, I married up a Midwest Hoosier, if this is Les saying, yeah, I married someone from the Midwest, I take umbrage with this, Frankie, because Les's wonderful spouse is from the state of Iowa, as am I.
Yeah.
However, Frankie, a Hoosier.
You were corn-fed.
Well, I also am corn-fed, yes. He says a Midwest Hoosier. A Hoosier is specific to a resident of one state in the Midwest, and it's not Iowa. It's Indiana. Indiana Hoosiers, it's a nickname that residents of Indiana have had for decade upon decade, and they adopted it. And it actually became the official demonym for residents of Indiana, I think in the last decade. It's not Indianans to describe them, it's Hoosiers. I've never been pleased with that lyric. But it's interesting to know because usually you use the name of the state to describe the resident of that state, Frankie, or that place. Yeah. People from Iowa are Iowans. People from California are Californians. People from the Virgin Islands are Dream Theater fans. It all makes perfect sense.
I love the diner imagery of waiter, check please, in the corner booth. I think that's a fantastic line.
That's very Waits-ish to me, too. Yeah. That he's in the corner booth just sitting there thinking about his age.
Coffee beans, fax machines. So pretty dative devices being brought up, but it's part of the narrative, right?
Coffee beans, fax machines, playing like a schmoozer.
This guy has been around long enough to use a fax machine.
Yeah, and I wonder if he's just referencing some of those things from, pun not intended, the daily grind with the coffee beans and the fax machines. You know, the things that he's thinking back on that he was wasting his time with, and all those daily things that we'd rather not be doing, but we kind of have to make our living. I do like that he comes back around with playing like a schmoozer. Are you familiar with the term schmoozer, Frankie?
Schmoozer, if I'm not mistaken, correct me if I'm wrong. A schmoozer is a guy, it's like a freeloader. It's a guy that is just getting things without giving anything back.
You could probably extend it to that. To me, a schmoozer is somebody, kind of a sweet talker, somebody who has to work the room, to establish relationships with people and that sort of thing, and they kind of have to grease those wheels with their words to curry favor, I suppose. But that's something you have to do, especially if you're in the music industry to make a living. That next stanza, Oysterhead, Zeppelin lead, I always love that inversion there to preserve the rhyme scheme. Oysterhead, Zeppelin lead, should have heard what Granny said. Paco de Lucia never seen a man like Flouncin' Fred. So many names there. We all obviously know Oysterhead and Zeppelin lead. Paco de Lucia, insanely famous flamenco guitarist.
Yeah.
And who passed, I believe, 10 or so years ago. I love that line, by the way. One, it's in jammed. He's putting a lot of syllables into that space. Paco de Lucia, never seen a man like Flouncin' Fred. And he's referencing his old high school buddy, Flouncin' Fred. I have no idea if any of that rings true. I don't know why they would have any opportunity to cross paths. Then he describes him as wrapped up, tapped out, crapped on, bled. Flouncin' Fred's been through it. Goodness me. As most of us have been, I suppose, by the time we get to our 40s, one way or another. But once again, I'm doing all right. I didn't get ground into spam anytime recently, Frankie, whether it is a Santa show or not.
Because, you didn't attend any Santa shows.
That's why, that's why I'm still alive.
It's curious that Les mentions Price is Right. If you're watching Price is Right, you're damn long in the tooth.
Yeah.
Because, as you're well aware, Shane, Lair's wife, was actually one of the models on the show from seasons 31st to 37. That was 2002 to 2008.
How did you have that information handy? That's incredible.
It was handy, yeah.
The Price is Right reference is more along the lines of age, given that...
Because the show has been around forever, right?
It's been around forever, and it's a daytime TV staple. Daytime TV is mostly reserved for older folks or people who are not working, the day shift, which is that most common shift, or kids who are off to school, right? I did want to put an asterisk on that lyric, too. If you're watching Price is Right, then you're damn long in the tooth. It's a funny line, but Les is forgetting 10-year-olds who have the flu and are staying home from school and don't have cable TV or a video game system. I remember watching Price is Right when I was homesick from school, and I thought it was the greatest TV program in the history of humanity. Have you ever watched it, Frankie?
Never.
Oh my gosh, you got to watch some Price is Right. It is the quintessential American game show. It is loud. It is over-excitable. The audience, I think, are hopped up on goofballs, and they are so excited to be there. I know they're directed to be, but they play it up. There's a lot of colors, a lot of music, a lot of games, a lot of money at stake. It is a colossal game show. I just thought it was the greatest thing. So
It's part of Americana, right?
100%. I would be 10 years old in the orange recliner in the room with the TV with saltines and watered down Diet Coke. That's all I got to have because my stomach hurt, right? I had the flu or whatever, and so I could nibble on saltines and sip watered down Diet Coke and watch Price is Right. And that's kind of how I spent my time when I was sick from school as a grade school kid. Next stanza, I sold off my rebellion for a pocket full of couth because I'm getting rather long in the tooth. Les is doing a great job, by the way, finding plenty of words that end in ooth to preserve that rhyme scheme to rhyme with tooth. I guess the word I would put to the word couth as a synonym is refinement. Instead of being a crusty punk like he was in the 80s, now he's a bit more refined. He's not as rebellious. He's turning into an elder statesman.
Do you find it curious that Buzzards of Green Hill does not have drums on it, and then this track is very percussive, but it also doesn't have traditional drums on it? I mean, at least not straightforward drumming. And
Right.
then the following track has a very unusual instrument on it. It's like Les was, I don't know if consciously or unconsciously, trying to steer away from any kind of traditional structure or, playing it safe in terms of instrumentation. He was really going out there on this album in terms of experimentation and what he could do musically.
Yes, I think this 3-track run from Buzzards to Tooth to Wamola, I don't know if he's swinging for the fences, but he's certainly trying different things. And you're right, he's avoiding a more standard approach because he's been stretching his creative muscles at this point in time and trying different things. Of late, he's been saying that he's the Evel Knievel of bass, and as we know, Evel Knievel
Yeah.
took all kinds of risks for better or for worse, and he's doing that on this record here because he's got so much space to explore at this point. He's not hemmed in. This track serves that notion, especially when you couch it in a Tom Waits perspective too. He's going, I want to write a song like Tom Waits would because I've never done it before, and he did. Then we get the repetitions of Stompin' Tom says, hey, hi, heave, hi, ho, which I don't know that I could say that 10 times fast like Les does. Stompin' Tom Connors was a Canadian folk and country western singer and songwriter, and well known in Canada. Some of his music made it to the U.S., and I believe that was part of Les's childhood. Frankie, is that right?
Yes, a big part,
That was going
a
over
big
to
influence.
Yeah, that was going over to Grandpa's house and hearing Tom Connors on the radio, along with Jerry Reed and all those other guys, I imagine. Did a little bit of reading up on Stompin' Tom, just legendary musician north of the border here in Canada. But that hey, hi, heave, hi, ho part, Frankie, that's from a Stompin' Tom Connors song, and that track is called Big Joe Mufferaw. That lyric shows up right in the beginning. So let's sample some of Big Joe Mufferaw by Stompin' Tom Connors.
Heave hi, oh, the best man in Ottawa was Mufferaw Joe, Mufferaw Joe. Big Joe Mufferaw paddled into Mattawa all the way from Ottawa in just one day. Hey, hey, on the river Ottawa, the best man we ever saw was Big Joe Mufferaw, the old folks say. Come and listen and I'll tell you what.
Good stuff.
I can definitely picture Les enjoying that.
Sing-songy, pretty catchy, telling a story once again. So that really seeped into his psyche, the storytelling aspect of the singer-songwriters that he was hearing as a young man. So good old Big Joe Mufferaw, hey, hi, heave, hive, ho, or whatever the hell it is a refrain from one of his tunes, and Les is cribbing it here for Long in the Tooth. And then finally, we get some repetitions of Long in the Tooth, and then, well, I'll take mine dirty with a splash of vermouth. I kind of like being long in the tooth. Maybe he's not going to leave the corner booth, Frankie. He's ordering another drink. And based on what I know, if you order it dirty with a splash of vermouth, you're probably ordering a gin martini. Although I have heard of a dirty Manhattan. Manhattans also incorporate vermouth. If you have really strong opinions about whether it's a Manhattan or a martini, please do let us know. But I'm team martini. So there's a lot to these lyrics with all these different references. It almost reads like stream of consciousness, but at the same time, it reads as almost kind of a summary of memories and some of the things
Yeah.
that made this guy who he is.
And now that you mentioned that, I think that when Les tackles the topic of memories or semi-autobiographical approach to the lyrics, they do tend to have this stream of consciousness quality, which we also discussed on Holy Mackerel.
And that was a little more opaque in what he was actually recounting. And of course, he's secretive with those darn lyrics, so even Soya doesn't know what the hell's going on in some of these.
Just random memories, I would venture to say.
Yeah, and he keeps it vague when he wants to, but some of these
Yeah.
are more readily apparent in this track. I did skip over that entire stanza with Mother Nature's greedy when you're long in the tooth. You ain't afraid of dying, but you're terrified of youth. I appreciate that stanza for the 2 points it makes, that Mother Nature's greedy takes more and more from you the older you get, whether it's your mental or physical faculties. And I love that line. You ain't afraid of dying, but you're terrified of youth. I gotta say, Frankie, I have kept one foot in my youth, or in that realm, thanks to being a public educator. And so I don't feel as disconnected from the kids as a lot of people my age probably do, because I'm around it every day. So I'm thankful for that. But at the same time, he raises that point that it becomes a generational thing or a generational divide that, boy, the kids these days are so different and I don't understand them. And because I don't understand them, it's scary, or they're horrible or awful and they don't live up to what my generation accomplished, which that has, going back throughout human history, that's been a common thread too. So he's bringing up a lot in a short amount of time with these lyrics, and I think they are some of my favorite lyrics on the record. Although we're only 4 tracks in, but they grabbed me.
What do you think could be the reason that Les didn't reach for this one often during the last Frog Brigade tour?
Well, they certainly had a lot of material to draw from by then, because this is 2002, Purple Onion, and so there was also Whales and Woe, Fungi and Foe. With Sean Lennon in the mix, they decided to alternate a couple CLD tracks each night. So there was a lot, and of course playing Animals takes up some time.
Yeah.
So there was a lot to pull from, and it is curious that this one only reared its head 7 times. But and I'm sure though, Frankie, that given the choice, you would take a rendition of Holy Mackerel every time.
Sure.
So there was that kind of material to draw from too. So yeah, only 7 times, but it's it's a fun little track, and then it can become a jam jalopy for the percussionists involved. And Mike D was there on that tour, so he had some fun.
It is fun, and you use the term sing-songy. It does have that quality to it, because although I don't reach for the track out of the blue, and I only listen to it in the context of the full album or a full concert that I'm listening to, regardless of that, I mean, I can quote the lyrics effortlessly, and they can get stuck in your head, right?
Yes.
If you've been listening to the album for a while, or if you were listening to a show, then yeah, those lyrics tend to get into your head. So I think it's very successful in that aspect. It's quite memorable.
Indeed, Frankie. And the one part that remains with me to this day is when he delivers the long in the tooth repetition, but he abandons that lower register to go long in the tooth, long in the tooth. And so it's even more amplified as far as the sing-songiness, as though Age is taunting him in that delivery. It's very funny to me. Let's hear some of our primates' takes on this one. Yes! If you would like to hear your takes read on this here podcast, all you have to do is go over to patreon.com/Primus Tracks. The universal benefit to all the tiers of support is that you get to chime in on the track up for discussion. Frankie, here's our takes for Long in the Tooth. Eric in Australia says, "Now the whips are cracking! Short and sweet. Pure whimsical Claypool with a slightly dark edge. I love the outro guitar solo, and the open minimal bass line is perfect for Skerrick to weigh in, within his allotted time space, of course." Ah, nice reference by Eric there. I'm sure, Frankie, you picked it up. You're nodding, but you're not saying what it is, so I have my doubts. That is, of course, a reference to Live Frog Set 1. What track is it that he goes over a lot of time, Running the Gauntlet?
Running the Gauntlet is quite long.
That's, yeah, because Skerrick has that allotted solo time, and he goes over it. When the music stops, he continues. Next is our good pal Brooks Delight, who distills it down. So this is, if you've been listening this long, here's the short version. At first, I think I overlooked this song. Maybe being sandwiched between Buzzards and Wamola made it easy to skip. Over time, I've really grown to love this one. The bass tone is big and deep with a bit of a growl. Skerrick's solo is fantastic on the track and even better at live performances. Another zinger from this record.
Fantastic.
There you go. Brooks boils it down yet again. And I love that he used the word zinger, which is a loaded term in the Primus title lexicon. Anthony Del Preet, go Bills, says the thick-ass Skerrick solo and tone in general gets me going too. The screechy guitar solo by the Redwood seems to mimic someone getting a bit old and crotchety. Les's super fat bass even kind of plods along the same way. The music really matches the mood of the song, much like Cosmic Highway. One facet of Purple Onion's greatness is how each track truly holds its own space on the record. Each very unique, and Long in the Tooth typifies that. Thanks, Anthony. Ryan Rashawn, I think, is trying to take Brooks's job, Frankie, because he simply says, a very Tom Waits-esque track. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, guys. Fantastic.
It's live cut time. I am hopeful, Frankie, by next episode, when we sample more live cuts for the next track, that we have a live cuts jingle. We have one contender in the hopper. I'm waiting on one more. But if you, the listeners of this here podcast, are at all interested in creating a live cuts jingle, send it to us. PrimusTracksPod@gmail.com. Frankie, we're getting in the old time machine and going to Boston, Massachusetts, the Roxy 2006, for a fancy version of Long in the Tooth.
Lots of jamming, intricate musicianship. Anything can happen with this song live.
Let's get fancy.
Long in the tooth. Mother Nature's greedy when you're long in the tooth. He ain't afraid of dying, but he's terrified of using. Must be getting rather long in the tooth. Stompin Tom to the hey-hi, heave-hi-ho. Stompin Tom to the hey-hi, heave-hi-ho. Stompin Tom to the hey-hi, heave-hi-ho. Stompin Tom to the hey-hi, heave-hi-ho.
Is that the sitar?
Yes, that's Gabby.
Gabby fits right in. Ooh, yeah. She hit the post perfectly there. Nicely done. That is fancy sounding. Our second live cut, we're going back to Burlington at the Ira Allen Chapel in 2002. Frankie doesn't have a descriptor for this one, so it's a mystery jam jalopy for Long in the Tooth here.
Long in the tooth, long in the tooth. I'm looking around the corner and I'm long in the tooth. Waiter, hey, chip, please, in the corner booth. I'm feeling rather long in the tooth. Time is a loser, boozer, spoozer. Carried up, married up a Midwest cruiser. Coffee beans, fax machines, playing like a snoozer. Getting rather long in the tooth. Oyster had 7 ladies, should have heard what Granny said. Paco de la Chia, never seen a man like Cousin Fred. Wrapped on, wrapped on, lit. Feeling rather long in the tooth.
Bum, bum. I like that. That's my. I love that little accent at the end. Sounds
So
pretty good
what do you
live.
think about this version?
It sounds pretty good. It's a nice recording for one. The lyrical delivery is very more on time and on meter. And that first one, of course, was bullet mic'd up. The Burlington one, I like the arrangement. I like what they're doing with the embellishments and the big thumps at the end. Sounds good to me.
Cool.
Well, I can say this. Long in the tooth, make a dental appointment because you've been tracked. Next time, Frankie, let's play a little game of Simon Says.
The first ever appearance of an instrument that would become synonymous with Les Claypool solo performances.
Primates, thank you guys so much for listening. We do have one more piece of business, Frankie, before we say later days. We have to thank our Primatrons over at patreon.com/Primus Tracks. There are many levels of support over there, and the sustained support from these fine Primatrons is greatly appreciated, and we want to recognize you here in the month of May. I think this is in order of most recent sign up to the oldest there, Frankie. So we're going to get the entire list here. Let's say thank you, Frankie, first to Sachko,
Thank you.
Tom Dastic. I hope I'm saying that correctly. Tom, please let me know. Maybe it's Stompin Tom. Brittany Ray, thank you so much. Wamola17, Edwin Allen Richards IV, our landed gentry. I believe he owns all of the land surrounding Primus Tracks Towers. Is that right, Frankie?
Indeed.
Okay, just making sure. He is a baron after all. Matt Ray, thank you so much. Oh yeah, I forgot. I have to say this every time. Deluge Nuts. Thanks, buddy. Jordan Kahn, our resident fish expert. Matt Crakely. Trish. Thank you, Trish. If you're
Thank you,
watching on
Trish.
video, here's Trish's fantabulous creation that it always sits by me. Thanks to Bo Campbell for his generous support. Less is more. Thank you very much. We also have Eric in Australia, John Gatwood, Mr. Tamby Meatfoot, Brooks Delight, Ryan Rashawn, Joseph Pebbler, Nick the Dutchie. Nick also has a Wamola, Frankie.
Yeah.
Travis in Alaska, number 1. Stephanie Wolfgang King, Carl Reinsch, Spent Poets expert, Carl Reinsch, that is. Travis in Alaska, number 2, who we just got to talk to on a Patreon bonus pod. Great chat with him.
Thank you, Travis.
Mike Chillian, thank you, Mike. Sarah Markham, she was the first bonus pod participant way back when, Frankie. How you doing, Sarah? Haven't checked
Never
in.
forgets.
We got to check in with her. How you doing, Sarah? Jesse Colton, who's our feet on the ground for a lot of Bay Area shows. Porter, thank you, Porter. Anthony Del Preet, go Bills. John Shreve, David Fraser Crane, Johnny Perona, Mr. Funknificent, Johanny Coho, Stephen Stang, Chris, Simon Altman, also in Australia, Mike Tuckerman, not in Australia. He's in Canada with Stompin Tom, Sculligan Val, Chris Gentile, Keith Thompson, Kevin's in my fair state of Oregon, so he's an Oregonian, Amber Porter, and finally El Patron numero uno, Carlos Arizmendi. Thank you guys all so much for your generous support and for hanging out with us at the monthly hangouts and for watching those bonus pods
Thank you so
And
much, guys.
yeah, and just commenting on all the silly links and things that I post in the feed there over on the Patreon. My gums are a little itchy. I wonder if they're receding. Later days.
Willie Mace.
Dirty with a splash of her mother.